Hello, welcome to this video on AI and algorithmic biases. In this video, we are going to discuss some of those algorithmic biases, what it means when they are input into some of our systems that we use every day. We'll also look at several real-world examples. The first thing I want to talk about is this quote from Cynthia Dwork, which was in a book called Algorithms for the People. And this book quotes her as saying, while many foster an illusion that algorithmic decisions are neutral, organic, and even automatically rendered without human intervention, the reality is a far messier mix of technical and human curating, because data and algorithms reflect choices about data, connections, inferences, interpretations, and thresholds. We're going to discuss some of that here in this next slide when we look at the different aspects of how data gets used. So we're going to start at the top where the top yellow section where it says discriminatory data. This data gets used to start building systems. Within that, we can see that there are sampling biases that might lack representative data sets. And then within that, there would also be patterns of bias and discrimination baked into data distributions. When we then apply that to AI design and deployment practices, there can be power imbalances and agenda setting and problem formulation issues. There can be biased and exclusionary design, model building, and testing practices. And there can be biased deployment, explanations, and system monitoring practices. From there, if we go to the next corner, the pink one, it talks about application injustices. And we look at how when these things start getting applied, they get applied unjustly across different systems, disregarding and deepening certain divides. This can exacerbate certain problems, particularly between rich-poor or minorities. This can also cause problems by being hazardous and discriminatory in the repurposing of these AI systems. We'll then see there are real-world patterns of health inequality and discrimination, which include unequal access and resource allocation, discriminatory healthcare processes, and this can lead to biased decision-making, not just in clinical practices, but all kinds of different ways that we're going to discuss momentarily. So our first example here is AI and criminal prosecutions. There is a company called NorthPoint, which uses a risk assessment score. And so this risk assessment score, when applied to criminal prosecutions, has been shown repeatedly, since 2016 at least, to cause problems. And in this case, we know that this specific case here with Vernon Prater and Brisha Borden, it discusses that Vernon is a low-risk person and Brisha is a high-risk person. In this case, Vernon happens to be a white man and Brisha is a Black woman. However, the computer algorithm got it wrong. Borden was never committed of any new crimes, and Prater is serving an 8-year prison term sentence for breaking into a warehouse and stealing thousands of dollars worth of electronics. ProPublica's report, there were 2 of them that came from this. This second one discusses how they went about identifying and testing that system and verifying the statistical test. And what they found is that Black defendants were more likely to be falsely flagged as future criminals, wrongly labeling them almost twice the rate as white defendants. And white defendants were mislabeled as low risk more often than Black defendants. They also ran statistical tests that isolated the effects of race from criminal history and recidivism, as well as from defendants' age and gender. Black defendants are still 44% more likely to be pegged as higher risk of committing a future crime or violent crime, and 45% more likely to be predicted at any crime at all. As you can see, this is problematic. The second example talks about AI and welfare programs. The Child Protective Services in Allegheny County, which is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, has been using an algorithm for at least 10 years to screen for child neglect. Parents have had children taken away from them based on biases built into those systems that are against disabled parents, minority parents, etc. And this is because that tool is, again, built on data that is flawed. The US Department of Justice has opened an inquiry into the use of this tool for that risk assessment. This third example talks about AI and the denial of healthcare. AI tools are being used by American healthcare companies to deny medically necessary coverage and procedures. This technology is overly aggressive in denying people care, and there are many recent examples that also include people on Medicare being denied care. This includes many older and elderly folks, which becomes hugely problematic, as we know that elderly are more likely to perhaps die if they don't get the care that they need. Our last example talks about AI in hiring. So Amazon's tool back in 2014, when they first built it, systematically discriminated against women who were applying for technical jobs such as software engineers. This again goes back to that pool being flawed. Amazon's system, when they developed it, was based on what they considered to be good hires and people who were successful at their company. However, those people tended to be male. Therefore, the screening system automatically put more men at the top of the list as opposed to women. So if you simply ask a software to discover other resumes that look like the resumes in a training data set, it's going to reproduce the demographics of that existing workforce. There is another book that had come out, and I have linked to it in the resources for this module. And Shellman discusses that these systems have not become any better over the years. And in fact, have other kinds of biases baked into them now. With that said, I do want to mention that there are many different other ways that bias is being baked into these systems. And we do have a lot of evidence of that, but I don't have a whole lot of time to go through it. I do hope that you will take the chance to read some of the things here and know that when we are using these systems, that harm can occur.